Hi, Whitney.
Welcome to the podcast where we acknowledge that the ways we are working really aren't working anymore.
We invite you into conversations with thought leaders, coaches, and industry experts to explore strategies for living with more ease and less grind, more flow and less fight. Welcome to Untrained. Hi, Whitney.
Hi, Iris.
Oh, we've got a great guest on today. Chinazom is a high-performance executive coach, mental fitness expert, and best-selling author of Real Talk. And he has his own podcast called Real Talk, and we're really excited to meet with him. And we've been colleagues and friends for a long time.
And Real Talk is speaking to giving men the skills to learn how to be in deeper connection with their emotions and learn the skills that many of them didn't get early on.
Hello, welcome.
I'm so excited to be on here because you two are very, very special to me. You're two of, I don't know if I've shared it, but you're actually two inspirational mentors to me who I met at a critical point in my journey. Iris, I remember having the chat with you before Valor, and I was just blown away. That didn't feel like an interview. And I feel my life started to change after that phone conversation. And Whitney, I still remember the pods you used to run for us, still to today. I still practice what you shared with me of how to carve out time to let go of the coaching practice so that when I return to my family and my real life, that I've made sure I've carved out that time to let go of that where I need to. So can't wait for this conversation. I'm just going to have so much fun. And thank you for inviting me on this.
Well, the idea we want to untrain is the idea that men's and women's mental health issues look the same and need the same resourcing and skills. So we really want to explore what's going on for men. What are the signs and symptoms for men? Because they look a little bit different. And then what kind of resources do men need? Because they may be different from women. So you are our resident expert, and we're thrilled to begin this conversation. And before I have you dive into your expertise, I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you have decided or felt called to this level of specificity, because when we were working together, you were working more generally, and now you're really targeting. You've written a book, you've got a podcast, Amazon bestseller book, specifically around working with men. So tell us how that evolved.
Yeah, I'd love to share how that evolved. I mean, I'm still working more generally with everyone because most of my clients were still women. But when I came to write the book, I wanted to think, okay, who is a group that's not being, served as much? Ed was the first thing that came up to me. And also the journey, I became a dad for the second time.
Oh.
And so I've got two now. And it just made me realize that for men, even though that this is my job and I do it 24/7, I was still getting my ass handed to me. And I was like, okay, I need to investigate why is that? And also I realized that a lot of the men, I'm now in my mid-40s, I just saw a lot of them having mental breakdowns. And I was just having to ask the question, why? Like, what is it that happens when we get to our mid-40s that we just start crashing? So that's what kind of helped with me writing the book, where I thought, where is there a gap in the market? Because everything about well-being is starting to take off, and the gap was men. And I wanted to start to understand why do men, when we get to 45, start to have these crashes? And what can I do to try and change that tidal wave that was happening? Because there was also, actually what sparked me was, I don't know if you guys heard of DJ Twitch on the Ellen DeGeneres show. And
he committed suicide.
He committed suicide, and that really hit me so hard because I remember his wife afterwards saying where, he seemed to have everything on the surface. He looked so happy. He was such a lovely person. And then bang, just like that. So that happened, something similar happened to me early on in my 30s. Luckily, the friend wasn't successful. So I started to think about, there's got to be something where we can start to have a conversation and start to bring this out to the open. Why does it keep happening to men? Why is it that when we get to that age, we don't seem to have the tools to do our mental fitness? And then sadly, a lot of us end up, we unfortunately, if you look at the stats, I think we make up nearly 70 to 80% of the suicide numbers. So in some small way, I just wanted to start a conversation to try and change that.
And if you step to the side, we'll see the title of your book, Real Talk. And can you say a little bit more about the title and what it means to you?
I think what it meant to me was, especially when I came over from the UK and I came over here, going through what I went through and then the pandemic, when I started to have contact with friends again, I noticed that the conversation was different. And I don't know what happened during that period, but they were willing to be more vulnerable. They were willing to share more. Friends who I'd known for 20 years. So I started to think, okay, how can I start to create those conditions to have more of those type of conversations where people feel that they can take off the armor and actually start to share what's going on. And it was really from coaching where, and when you have coaching conversations, you really get to see the real people. And after spending so long in corporate life where I kind of thought, we never had any real talk. Everyone's always got some armor on. There's always some sort of politics going on. So I wanted to try and create the conditions for men to have that real talk, because I really believe when you have the real talk and you actually share what's going on, 9 out of 10 times, it's a lot better when it's not just going on in your head. And when you actually say it out loud, you share it with people, it's never as bad as you think. So small bit I thought I could try and do is try to have that conditions and show men this is what real talk looks like. And this is how you can have it, so that you have more of that. And then you can start to have a starting point to look at your mental fitness.
I had a question around where you see, because you work with women too, maybe not so much a comparison, but what are some things that you're seeing as challenges for men, either to have the real talk, or what do you feel like they're holding in their 40s and 30s? What are you seeing as you're having these conversations?
The biggest challenge I'm seeing is that men we don't even understand our emotions. Because I think as growing up, don't cry, you're always supposed to be the tough guy, which means at a young age, you're literally swallowing your emotions. You're hiding your emotions. You can't show weakness. So you go through your life not understanding your emotions, hiding your emotions, not showing weakness. And then when things start to get challenging, you become a dad, there's all sorts of things coming on. You don't even have the toolkit to understand it, let alone start to express it to anyone else. So those was definitely the things I saw were going on. And then the part the society plays of what it means to be a man, I really wanted to just rip that to shreds, because it just really upset me that men don't cry. That's also the biggest nonsense I wanted to get rid of, because it's like with my son, I definitely wanted him to grow up in a different way where he could see that I do cry, I do have emotions, I do get scared, but I can still get up and do something. But I didn't want him to not tune into his emotions. That was the first thing I wanted to start just getting rid of that myth for men, is that you can cry. You don't have to pretend to be this Superman all the time, because it's so hard carrying that armor where you're always supposed to be pretending that you've got it together, that you're not scared. Loads of men are scared. But not being able to show that as well, I think that just makes it even worse. But if you can show that to your partner, that it's okay to cry, then that's where I find that you find real courage. Because once you can be vulnerable, okay, I've cried, I'm still going to go out and protect you guys. And I found actually I started having discussions with a lot of other dads, and I found that the other dads struggled to cry in front of their wife, which always positive. Like, why can't you do that? And it's like, that's why I started to see not only the society puts this image on the man of what you're supposed to be, the man also believes that the woman feels that he has to play that part. So there's like a double-edged, not only does he feel he can't cry, he also feels that if his wife sees him crying, oh dear, what's going to happen?
I thought it was so powerful when you said, I can cry and then I can still go out and protect you, right? That there's an and going on, and that having emotions doesn't mean you're no longer strong or able to be a protector. That just seemed like a powerful juxtaposition.
And that's what I'm trying to show to men now, in that you actually get your strength from tapping into your fear and being able to show that. And it happened from a mentor of mine. I went around some friends and asked them to list 5 values that they saw in me, just to help me kind of update my identity. And he put one of them as fearless. And I heard it, I was like, I had to go and ask him, what are you talking about? I'm scared all the time. Why would you say that? And he said that I put that down because you're scared and you will show the fear, but if you know it's the right thing to do, you will still go and do it. And that stuck with me, like it stayed with me for a long time, that you should be able to show that fear. Doesn't mean that, yeah, you still have the fear, but by showing that fear and being vulnerable, you can actually make others realize that it's okay, but we're still going to go out and face whatever the thing is that we need to face. And another part as well for me was also my dad. In the later stages of my life, because he was always this really great figure, shows no fear. But then in the later stages of my life, he actually showed me that he does get scared and he does cry. I feel like I found more respect for him than that. Wow, you were able to do all those things and you're actually scared. So I wish he'd showed me that when I was younger. And that's something I wanted to change with my son, that you actually get more strength when you're able to show your fear and then you still go out and do what you want to do.
I'll just make just a social commentary. I think we're in a good place in the world right now where people are really adjusting their paradigms around and shifting around what women should be like and what men should be like. So we're at a good moment, right? Whitney and I talk about this all the time, where we sort of missed and had a gap opportunity where women and men needed to realign their relationships as women went back into the work world or as they're pursuing their careers. What are women responsible for? How can women show up? And the same thing for men, right? So the reason why we have you on is we felt like there's so much emphasis on what women need as we make these transitions and as the world continues to develop. Where do men fit, right? Like, how are men going to show up? We have all of these books, all these things about women showing up strong, being the boss, the feminist movement, all these things. But I felt like there was not enough for the men. So where do the men fit in, right? Because we used to know where men were. They were strong. They didn't show emotions. Then they were the breadwinners. And then women, they stayed at home with the kids. And so we have these shifting paradigms. But again, the impetus for this talk was I felt like there was just not enough resources for men and tools for them to shift. Because women are shifting, men have to shift too.
And I'm going to back it up and say, we're talking men and women, and we're implied as people identify as men, as people identify as women. But really, we're talking about masculine and feminine characteristics. And historically, the women have to embody femininity and the men have to embody masculinity. And I think we're looking to give people more room to embody both. And so is this really a conversation about women being able to embody feminine and masculine traits and men being able to embody masculine and feminine traits? So, and that leads to sort of conversations about toxic femininity and toxic masculinity. So I've teed you up to go in lots of directions. Chinazom, where do you want to take it?
I love what you just said. And I also wanted to just start off with the paradigm shift of what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine. And I wanted to share actually coming over to the US, when we first arrived with me and my wife, I was in a vulnerable place because I couldn't work. And my wife was pregnant, 6 months pregnant. So all of a sudden she was the only one that could work. Not only was she pregnant, but she was the only one that could work. So she had to be the breadwinner. Then all of a sudden, you are becoming a dad. You're kind of thinking, well, I'm not the breadwinner. What role do I play here? And you're trying to be there for your wife, which is, that's the person who's carried the child and had the child. But there was also a lot of emotions going on for me. Is like the first time I saw my son, I was just you just didn't know what to do. What am I supposed to do now? But with those emotions, you had no space to start sharing that emotions because your wife has just gone through labor for God knows how long. She's had a human being come out and have her back together. So it was just a crazy period of my life where I was trying to be there for my wife, but also realizing things were happening to me as well. And then at the same time, I was just moved from the UK to the US, trying to get, with my in-laws. My in-laws used to be across the pond. Now they're right on top of me, really close, trying to adjust to that, trying to adjust to a new business. It was just like a pressure cooker of, there was just no space to share. Now I shared all this. This is like going back 4 years now. So I've been able to share it with my wife and she's been really supportive. But at the time, I love what you just said, Iris. There was no space to even share that. And there's a great group in the UK, which I just found out is like Black Dads. New dads just come and start to actually talk about the experience of becoming a dad. Like, what role were you meant to play? Are you, I remember like I was the one looking after my son at the time because my wife was working. So I'm doing everything. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, but I'm supposed to be the breadwinner. Am I supposed to be doing this? So I'm having this conflict of I really want to look after my son because I need, and then also having the conflict of what society tells me I should be doing. I feel like a lot more discussion needs to be had about that because I feel we all have different roles that we play at different stages because life throws you different challenges. So at some point, the woman is going to have to step up to be the breadwinner. That's another point. So I feel like women have masculine, I think we all have that masculine and feminine things, which can come out of us as is needed. And it should be okay. It should be able to be fluid. I mean, for instance, my wife's going to hate me saying this, but I'm doing most of the cooking in the house and I'm okay with that. But she keeps beating herself up because she's like, she's supposed to be the one that does all the cooking. So it's like, you just play to your strengths, I feel, at that time. As long as you play to your strengths and you create a happy, harmonious home, that I think is the most important thing, not living up to stereotypes.
Well, and you're speaking to a lot of untraining that's going on inside your household, inside of you. And I always think untraining starts with the permission slip, right? You have permission to be the one who cooks. You have the permission to be the one who doesn't cook. You have permission to cry. You have permission to be a badass leader, whatever it is. I think it starts with a permission slip that we need to accept.
How about, you had said something that in the groups that you're part of, that they have difficulty showing the vulnerability to their partner. So where does someone begin, right? Because you've explored some of this, you've really gone deep, but how does someone really make the first step if they're not really ready to take on the whole conversation of the roles? Because not everyone is, right? Not everyone has gone that depth.
Or has role models.
So where do you think someone could begin?
Well, I think first of all is finding a group of, so now we have a group of guys and we all start talking with each other. And then by talking with each other, we actually started to realize all these fears that we have and how we struggle with how we're going to raise our kids up. So then we can start to like verbalize different things that we have and make it normal. Then you can start to get comfortable with yourself first. When you start to get comfortable with yourself, that it's okay to cry or it's okay to feel like this about shouting about your son or disciplining your son. When you're okay with that, then I think you can then go to your partner and start to broach the subject and find that common ground. Because for instance, the person who shared with me that they don't feel comfortable crying with their partner, I'm not going to say go and do that, but I'd start to share stories of saying how it was okay in my case, and then give him time to start to get okay with it in his way, and then he would find his way of how would he want to share it with his partner.
Yeah. I want to come back to this. I mean, this is something I've really learned from coaching, and I just want to point out, like, I find that I can't invite a client in to experience something unless I am comfortable with it. So be that, certain feelings or crying or whatever that is. So I just want to name, by nature of you, Chinazom, being comfortable with crying, with the feeling, with these conversations, that presence is an invitation. And then in addition, you're creating space in conversation. So I just want to name how powerful that is, and just doing that excavation, that shift within ourselves is in and of itself an invitation. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
It's so crazy that you said that, because my wife actually said that to me the other day. I was having a discussion with her, and I was like, how can I make people more comfortable to remove the armor? And I had this discussion because especially when I work with senior people, I find that they have so much armor on. It's like, I don't even know where to start. And then she said to me that you don't understand the power of your presence, just you being you. And if you're just you, then that's how the person will start to feel comfortable. So it made me actually start to realize that I have to do the work on myself first. So I can't make anyone believe something unless I believe it myself. So it's like me crying or believing in mindfulness. I've got to do it on myself and test it out. And then I feel like if I do that work, then if I'm in that person's presence, it'll give them that permission to take off the armor. I feel that you're not going to get judged. This is a safe space.
Yeah.
How does one, I'm actually really curious. You and I had this conversation a while back before this. We talked about how men, when a lot of times the relationships are pretty surface level, they get together, they play a sport, they play golf. How are the, we have the Buffalo Bills here. How the Bills doing? Did you see Josh Allen last week? And oh, did you try that IPA at the, distillery over here? So how does, women have a tendency, we can, in general, the feminine quality is that we can get pretty deep with each other and talk. So how do men get in there, right? So because how do you go from hey man, how are the Bills to last week I felt like crying because my kid something. You know what I mean? How does one go from there to there? Because I'm curious. Because I for me it's that book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. I do think about it. I was like, how does Kevin actually, my husband, bring these things up? Is he playing tennis, hits the ball, and he's like, last week my wife really challenged me, and I don't think that's happening. So how does one find a group? How are the Bills? And I'm really sad.
That's such a great point that you brought out, because my wife has just started coaching, and I think I shared this with you, Iris, how women are when I'm coaching women, they're going below the surface. I don't even need to ask them. They're like, we're going below the surface. Guys, stay down. So I said to her, you can't do that with a male client. They'll just be like, what the hell are you doing? I didn't say I wanted to dive. I don't even know how to dive. Don't take me below the surface. But I actually did a book review last week, and it actually taught me a lesson of the real talk. Sometimes with men, just because of the way we were raised and everything, we don't even need to talk. Just being there in the presence is good enough. And they're talking about sports. It used to upset me because why are we just talking about nonsense here? Why are we not talking about what really matters? But I've started to learn that that's the way men build trust. Mm-hmm. You might think it's just a nonsense conversation, but actually they're talking about sports and thinking, okay, what's this person's viewpoint about? How did he analyze that sports play? Is he the kind of person that just goes with, what's the popular people saying, or actually does he stick to his opinions? So actually that banter, we call it banter in the UK, you're kind of getting a feel for the person. And with men, it just takes us a long time to trust, because usually you might have to compete with this person. So we're just going to trust you just because you come and say, trust us. It doesn't happen. So I've started taking a step back from that book review I did. Was the banter is actually quite important. Mm-hmm. And you just have to have a lot more patience with men. Because I've been coaching with men where you feel like you're just having I call it above the surface. You're having this conversation. You feel like you're going round and round, and then bang, they'll just say something. You're like, what the hell did that come from? And then they'll just decide, okay, I trust this person. Now I'm going to start offloading.
I have this joke with Iris that it's sort of it's like dogs sniffing each other, deciding whether they want to play. So the banter is the sniffing.
I'm just thinking, I'm seeing Wild America, where the two whatever, they have big horns and they're fighting with each other, and that they need to respect each other first, and then they can go off and hang out, But it's important for us to know, right? So it's important for all of us to know, how does someone build trust? How can we, as coaches, as people, how can we relate to each other? Because I think it is a miss. I think personally, I think I told you this in my own relationship. I felt like I treated, Kevin like he is strong and he has all these things, and yes, he is. But at the same time, I think I forgot that he's also vulnerable. So I think also, approaching that as a female and as a wife is oh, I don't need to have this fight here. Maybe there's a point of vulnerability that he feels, and maybe that's not being expressed. So I think it's really interesting. I learned that through coaching too, because I agree. I've had many male clients, and there's a lot of banter, and I would always wonder, why aren't we getting below the surface? Because the women I have, we just go day one, they're like, you're willing to listen to me? All right. 2021, this happened. Yeah. Then on August 2nd, you know what I mean? It's
and when I was 6, this happened.
When I was 6, my mother said that I had bad hair, and that was it. So I think it's just interesting. I think it's fascinating. Is there...
I'm going to add to that is women also very reflective. If you ask them, how did that make you feel? I felt like this. You ask a man, how did that make you feel? I was just, what the hell are you talking about? What feel. I don't care about how I felt. So you have to actually give them more space to just start even tuning in that, how did I feel? No, I'm going to have to come back to you on that one tomorrow and take the time out for that.
So, Chinazom, when you ask somebody, a male client who's learning to take the armor off, how they feel, and you can sense they're like, what? How do you back it up? How do you ease in?
For all the wives in the room.
We're listening.
I remember there's a sales guy who I was working with, and I kept wanting to bring up Brené Brown to him. This was early on in my practice, and I was like, this guy's going to laugh me off the Zoom call if I say Brené Brown. Like, he's just going to think I've lost it. I started with Hoosiers. There's a film called Hoosiers with Gene Hackman where he has to like coach this basketball team and give them an identity.
Oh, Hoosiers, yes.
I started trying to test the waters with that. But I feel now what I do is I listen to the banter, and I start to listen to the way he talks about the sports team or the way he talks about his friends. So how does he gain trust with other people? But a big part of what I do is I will just start sharing about myself. I'll start sharing about my experiences, or I did this, and usually they'll look at me a bit like, oh, this guy's a bit crazy. But I find that when I start sharing about myself, I start to set this is how I want the space to be. This is what I want us to share about. But I do pay a lot of attention to the banter. Like, literally, what is he telling me about the relationships and the things he cares about? And then I just try and give them patience to basically, I'm here for your benefit, for you to do well. And then just give them that patience that once I start to sense that they're starting to trust a bit, then I will start to like take them slowly. I feel like it's like a diver. You're trying to take somebody below the surface. So you have to first work out, are they okay in the water?
Yeah.
They know how the diving kit works. Okay, maybe let's just dip our head in first of all. Were you okay with that? And then, then we start to go down.
So step 1, decode the banter. Step 2, role model, sharing your feelings.
Yeah.
Step 3, create an invitation and be patient. Did we get that right?
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know how to decode the banter, but...
Yeah, I don't know how to... I'm also, like, that's fascinating.
The patience is a really key one. So it's like you're dancing and you have to work out with the person as you're dancing. Is that like, okay, I just tried to take us below the surface. Did that work? How did they respond to that? And that, I think with men, you have to be a bit more patient. Like, you can't just jump in if you haven't gained their trust. And you have to, you can't start going below the surface.
For me, the takeaway is that I know we're using gender references, but I think in the masculine, the banter is what builds the relationship. Whereas for, I think more in the feminine side, the banter doesn't indicate a relationship building. It actually indicates a disconnect into the relationship. I think that's sometimes, right? So if a woman is really just talking about the weather or the thing she did the other day, if you're not getting below the surface, we don't really trust each other yet. Whereas men, it's different. Well, that's kind of the takeaway I'm getting. Not to make it bilateral like that, but it's just a shift in my mind, how I think about it.
Something else just came to me where I got to meet my coach, who I'd been working with for 18 months, and he finally came to the US. He was living in the UK. And it was so strange. I don't know whether you get this, where you've been talking with someone on Zoom and then you actually meet them in person, and then all of a sudden it's awkward. And I'm like, this is strange. So he came to the house and it was still a bit awkward. And even my wife could sense it. It was like, is this the person you've been talking about for that long? But then all of a sudden we came downstairs and we have ping pong here, table tennis. And we started playing ping pong. And then all of a sudden the boy came out instead of this. And then once the boys came out, obviously he lost the game.
Obviously he lost the game.
Obviously.
I love this.
Obviously. And the trash talking came out. And then by the time we came up, my wife was just like, that was a different person. And the conversation just changed. So whenever I have the boys' night over here, when I get the dads out, I always try to bring some sort of sports, because there's something about tapping into the boy. Iris, I think, is when you talked about your husband, where because you see this person who's strong and together, you forget that there's a boy inside there who feels scared, who doesn't know whether he's got it together. And if you can't tap into that boy, that's hard to like actually gain the trust. You actually have to tap into the boy inside and think, what are they feeling? What do they need? And how can I get like this?
So I'm going to add another step. Play ping pong.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask one more question. Maybe it's a final question, but is there, if you had the power to change things, and we already talked about, feeling emotions, is there something else that you feel like needs to shift either socially or in the men's mindset that will help, right? So what else needs to shift? If you could shift something tomorrow, what would it be?
Let's share something tomorrow. Can I go
be externally? Yeah.
Yes.
Two things. Yeah.
Firstly, I would definitely start having more groups where men could come and just have conversations and real talk, or like that group in the UK. When I saw it, it just blew my mind because it was just a load of new dads all there talking about their emotions, talking about their feelings. And I was like, if I could multiply that by 100, it would definitely start to shift the experience I went through. Because if I had a group where I was talking about the dads and loads of dads could go and talk about that, it would definitely. So the more I call them real talk groups that men can have, that's definitely going to have a huge shift. The other one is, I love this podcast where the women are actually trying to understand what's actually going on in their men's heads. How can I help them? And something that my wife did where at the beginning used to really upset me, where she'd keep, how you feeling? How you like every time she would keep asking that question. And in the beginning, it just used to upset me, but now she's done it so many times that I actually ask myself, okay, how did I feel about that? What's my emotion? Just that reminder, because we just never do it. We don't tune into that power. We're just like, I just need to get this done. How do I get it done? But the more you can actually start to tap into the emotion and tap into the child inside, I feel that could actually start to make men understand their emotions. And then hopefully from the real talk group, then they'll start to get the toolkit to express those emotions. Because I think those are the two things that are missing. We don't understand the emotions. And especially with men, we're like, you're either happy or you're angry. There's no middle bit. But when I saw that group where they can start to get the language to express, this is how I felt, this is what I want to do about it, then I feel that we're going to be in a better place for our mental fit.
I will just add, if you're interested in starting a group for your own group of people, that they should reach out. We'll put some links in to be able to reach out to you, Chinazom, and so that you can give some guidance on how to bring this together. Because it is hard to go from, hey, let's just meet on Fridays to, hey, let's talk about our feelings after ping pong, right? So I think it is having guidance. And here you have someone that could be a resource for you. Well, do you have any last questions, Whitney? I have lots of questions. I'm like, can I take you home with me and you can help me?
Can we have you on again, part 2? Yes. And if you're listening, what questions do you have? Let us know.
I would love to come on again if people have questions, because I've been so excited about this podcast because I always enjoy talking with you. So any chance that I can get to do that, I'll take it anytime.
And you have a Real Talk. Yeah, Real Talk podcast too. So they'll follow you on your own podcast as well as you talk about these things. I would love to just go around the room and think about one takeaway, because I'm holding one in my head. But what's one takeaway?
Why don't you start, Iris?
I think at the end of the day, I know we started with the untraining of we have different human experiences, but I think the human needs at the base are all the same, right? Community, being able to label your emotions, being able to connect with others, being your full self as a human, messy, unmessy. I think that's the challenge for all of us. So it's really interesting at this conversation. I feel less divided. I feel more we're experiencing the world and all trying to handle the challenges as they come, whatever society pushes on us, or what we put on ourselves. But we're still human beings with the same types of needs. I sort of think of Maslow's theory a little bit. Just what are our needs? And most of us have similar needs. And I think it's also just an invitation to have more connection. That's how I feel after this too, is I think in this day and age, we just need more connection, because so many of us we're on Zoom. We're not really connecting, but we just need more points of connection with each other. That's what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. My takeaway would be respect the banter and use it as an opportunity to listen from a deeper part of yourself, that you can just be listening to that person and decoding the banter. And I'm going to work on figuring out what that means just by being curious and respecting the banter.
Love that. Actually, I have a question that just popped in my head. I hope it's okay to ask both of you this question.
Please.
What could you guys do to make space for the men in your life to cry?
Oh, I have a son. That guy has been, the red carpet has been rolled out for him a bazillion times to cry.
You take the opportunity?
What?
Does he take the opportunity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's an emotionally astute and vivacious human, and he's been handed lots of opportunities to respect and listen to his emotions. Now we might need to do some additional training. I'll call you in.
I don't have a son. I have two girls. But I'm thinking about my husband, but I think it's the patience part, because that's at almost 50 years old, and he grew up in a pretty, I'm revealing all the things. I'm glad he doesn't listen to the podcast. Yeah, we're all very supportive of each other. He doesn't listen to my I think, I think it's more just having more space where he doesn't have to talk, where we're just spending time together, or it doesn't have to be me saying, how do you feel about this? And what do you feel about that? And how does that going? Like, I don't need to be the coach or to pepper any of those things. I could just be present. And so that's kind of what I'm learning from you too, Chinazom, is you said by the nature of your being, your ability to show those emotions, your ability to model. I think in this way, in my household, it's modeling behavior. And I often thought about modeling behavior that I want from him too, right? Like I want him to be present and listening. And I think it's the same thing, is taking the time to do that and being patient as he tells the story or not, whatever he's comfortable with. But I think of in a broader sense too, I'm just not sure. I think I'm taking away from this too with that question is, what else as a human in this world can I do to help impact the lives of the men that exist in my life? So any sort of other thoughts, or as we go out there, the friends, I'm not sure yet. That's my honest answer.
That's a great answer. What am I taking away? I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think that then I'm taking away as well is how to tap into the inner child in the men when I'm engaging with them, because I feel like that's something that's going to help build that trust. And also what you just said, Iris, is also realizing sometimes silence is key. Like you don't actually have to be talking. Like I was actually sharing this with my wife. There used to be a friend of mine. I remember when something happened, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I was really in a bad state. And I called him up and he said, yeah, you can come over. And I went over. It took me, he had like a forest near the house. We just went there, sat there. Then we went and did some fishing. Very little talking. By the time we finished, by the weekend, I felt 10 times better. And it's like, almost like he sensed that I wasn't quite finished processing it, but I needed somebody around to process it. Occasionally I might say something or whatever, but I don't remember us talking that much. And somehow I felt like spiritually, when I came back to London, he lived in the middle of the UK, I felt 10 times better. So that's actually keeps coming back in my head to actually realize that it might not look like talking, or it might, like whatever mental fitness looks like, it might not always look like that for a man. And if you could actually just give that space to spiritually feel what the person needs, then you'll be able to provide what they need at that time.
Oh, I like that. Mental fitness is not always talking.
Yeah.
That's a good one, because we think in performance psychology, we're using a lot of this back and forth, but mental fitness is not
does not always require
talking. Interesting.
Love it.
Okay.
Bam.
Well,
Drop
thanks.
the mic on that one.
Drop the mic. And thank you so much for being a part of it and part of our podcast. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the Untrained podcast. And what do we say, Whitney, at the end of every podcast?
Well, I want to say it, and then I want to hear Chinazom say it, because I want to get the male voice in here. Keep untraining. So I'll say keep untraining.
Keep on training. I'll say